Success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Real Truth listeners. Today I have RT Custer. He is the founder of Vortic Watch. Thank you, RT, for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Vinny. I appreciate you.
You know what? So I have so many different people on here. Entrepreneurship based. I have 250 guests on here. And for the most part, it's people, are building something that's, I guess, different, that hasn't been around for a long time. When you think of watch, a watch has been around, I don't know, 80 years. Longer. So you jumped in, you built a business where there was like established companies and that have been around for a long time. So I'm definitely intrigued in this right here, because I think for a lot of people right there, they go, oh my gosh, there's so many big hitters in that line, in that industry right there. Why would I ever want to jump in there? So I'm very intrigued on your story today. So I'm excited for this one.
Thank you. Yeah, happy to share. And yeah, thanks for addressing that. It's definitely something that we didn't do a whole lot of research on when we started the company, but found out there was a ton of other watch companies as we went. So here we are.
Well, I love starting the podcast with just kind of your elevator pitch. If someone asked you, RT, what do you do? What does your company do? How would you describe it?
Yeah, great question. I just practiced this, and I'm practicing it now because I'm about to raise money and we're pitching for a grant. So I appreciate the additional practice. Vortic Watch Company salvages and restores antique American pocket watches and turns them into one-of-a-kind wristwatches, preserving American history one conversation piece at a time.
That's great right there.
And that's what we do. So it's basically antique American, specifically pocket watches made, 100 years ago or so by one of what we call the American or the great American watch companies. And then we turn those into one-of-a-kind wristwatches, and we make about one watch every day. And that's it. They're all totally unique and, very low production quantities.
Okay, well, now that I guess it brings me to the next question. A young RT, was he messing around with stuff he found at the antique store, and was he at garage sales, or who was the young RT?
Yeah, young RT was a farm boy. I grew up on a Christmas tree farm outside of Reading, Pennsylvania, and I guess my fascination when I was little was Legos. I loved building things. I loved learning how things worked. So much so that my parents were both in marketing and advertising for their whole careers. And they were just like, okay, do you want to be an architect? Do you want to be an engineer? All that kind of stuff. And, I grew up around all kinds of equipment, using chainsaws to cut down Christmas trees and different things like that. And so I'm not necessarily today, I definitely would not call myself handy by any means, but I am fascinated on how things work, and especially how things are made. I ended up studying industrial engineering at Penn State, and focused on supply chain. And so supply chain and logistics. And so I went more of the how it's made, where does it come from, supply chain theory kind of stuff, than the actual how how it works technically, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. Well, let's rewind a little bit, talking about growing up on a Christmas farm. So did your parents grow the trees and also sell the trees, just grow the trees and then sell it to a company, and then the company would sell it directly to the user? What was that process like?
So my great-grandfather started the farm in 1941, and he and my grandfather were foresters. And so they knew everything there is to know about trees in general, especially Christmas trees. And so we had a very small farm. It was about 41 acres. And we sold a few thousand trees a year, almost entirely direct to consumer. We focused on, I guess maybe this is how I got here. We focused on quality over quantity. It was just hammered into me since I was a little kid that like it's much better to make more revenue and profit off of less total units. That's a much less stressful business to run. It's a much more fun business to run. And it's also much more fun to go direct to consumer because you can meet the customers, get feedback, create relationships, create lifelong customer relationships. And that's really what my great grandfather and grandfather did. And my parents, took that over and taught me everything I know about sales and marketing, and also obviously, the act of growing the trees and taking care of crops on an annual basis.
What do you think you picked up? Because being that is a seasonal based business right there, right? Where you're getting most of your money end of the year. I mean, and then you're kind of planning, I guess, for the rest of the year, kind of how
Yeah.
much you're going to make. I mean, what do you think you picked up as a young child to kind of look at life, I guess, or look at business? Was there anything you took away from that?
Yeah, I distinctly remember an instance, and I don't know how old I was, probably 7 or 8. And I distinctly remember we had a really good sales day. And my dad and mom let me like sit at the counter with them at the end of the day and like count up. It might have been a weekend. Like we were only open like Thursday through Sunday typically during the holiday season. And so at the end of the weekend, I think it must have been a Sunday night, we sat down and we counted all the cash because it was mostly a cash-based business when I was little. And I remember not only like my dad, obviously we were chatting and talking about how much, money we made per tree and how many checks we got versus cash and all that kind of stuff. But I remember my dad saying, okay, we have, and I'm going to make up a number, but let's say it was $12,000. I remember him saying, we're going to keep this 2,000 and use it for immediate expenses and use it for fun and stuff like that. And then we're going to put this 10,000 in the bank because we need to save, because we have, to your point, Vinny, but 10 or 11 months of no revenue that we have to survive before the next time we get to make money. And so I do think a lot of financial lessons came from that, especially like just being responsible financially from that, seasonal business and having to only make money once a year, 1 month a year.
Now you go to college, you're looking at systems, kind of like, okay, how can the process go smoother? Was there any time when you thought about going back to your parents' business, your family business, and kind of help them work on their systems to refine it or clean it up or do anything like that?
Yeah. So unfortunately, in the early 2000s, um, most Christmas tree farms, especially the smaller ones, were either put out of business or were
Oh, wow.
struggling because huge companies like Walmart, Home Depot, Lowe's started selling Christmas trees. And today you can go to Whole Foods and buy a
Yeah.
Christmas tree for 30 or 40 bucks. Back then, even in the late 90s, when I was early 2000s, when I was selling trees, we were selling them for $75 to $100 a piece. We were making premium trees. And that's what we specialized in. And the market for that just got crushed by these huge companies. And a lot of good can come from that. And I went to work for Walmart in logistics after college, so I'm not like hating on them by any reason. But there's the economics of that are interesting to me. And so to answer your question, when I was in college, I came back, pretty much every winter time and did the best I could to help. But really through my high school and college years, my parents kind of realized that this wasn't a sustainable business that could feed us, for our lives. And they always had I would say the Christmas tree farm was kind of a side hustle for our family forever. They always had full-time jobs, both my parents and my grandparents too. And so at a certain point, and then my parents got divorced. And so my mom was left with the farm and had to do everything. And so she just kept scaling back and scaling back and scaling back. And so I don't want to say like I couldn't add value because, it just wasn't worth it. But in some ways, my efforts and my time were best spent creating my own thing and creating something new and different. And fast forward to today, about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, I lost my mom to cancer. She was the only one taking care of the farm. I inherited the farm. I'm in Colorado now. The farm's in Pennsylvania. And so I decided to sell the farm, which was obviously a very difficult thing for myself and my family. But I've invested those funds into all the things I'm doing now. And I like to think my great-grandfather and my grandfather would be proud of, obviously like sad that we couldn't continue the farm. But the entrepreneurial lifestyle that they instilled in me is being perpetuated in myself, in my employees, in my teams, in my business partners, and hopefully in my two sons. Someday they'll take over what I'm doing, and it won't be a Christmas tree farm, but it'll be, right now it's a watch company. Who knows what it'll look like in 20, 30 years.
Makes sense. Now, so you're at Walmart, you're working there. Kind of what happens next?
Yeah, so I did a bunch of internships in college, worked for Procter & Gamble, worked for Sam's Club in Bentonville, Arkansas, and then I got an offer full-time from, the parent company, being Walmart and logistics, and they moved me out to Colorado. During I guess it was my junior year, I ran a business painting houses. Shout out to College Works Painting. It was a cool multi-level marketing company that I joined when I was in college. And I met my current business partner, Tyler Wolf, painting houses. We painted houses for the summer, and we became friends through that business, started playing golf together. And we had the idea for Vortic Watch Company, one of the original ideas, on the golf course after school at Penn State one day. We kind of sat on it. We worked on it for a couple college projects. We're just kind of thinking about this idea, all the different ideas we had around watches. And then when I graduated from school, moved to Colorado, Tyler was like, I was thinking about moving to Colorado too. I just want to get out of Pennsylvania. And at some point we decided hey, let's try to start that watch company we thought of in college. And we launched Vortic Watch Company on Kickstarter in November of 2014. And our Kickstarter was successful. We set out with the goal of raising $10,000 as here's our minimum viable product, see if people like the idea of taking a pocket watch, turning it into a wristwatch. People love the idea. We made about $41,000 in 30 days on our Kickstarter campaign, which you and I now know is not enough to really start a business, but it was still really exciting. And that was a lot of money to us, fresh out of school. And so he went to work trying to figure out how to make the watches, which he still does today. He runs all of our operations and manufacturing. And I went to work, I was also working full-time for Walmart at that time. So my nights and weekends were customer service, emails, and all of our finances and marketing. Trying to figure out how to grow the business. And at that time I was raising money, doing equity financing. That was really the first few years of the business, is figuring all that out.
Now, how long from the Kickstarter, right, to how long after the Kickstarter did you actually say, okay, I'm going to quit basically the full-time job that I have and go fully into Vortic?
After Kickstarter, it was about 2.5 years. We had an idea to basically, and it's funny how life is full circle. I just had the realization earlier of we were selling Christmas trees, quality over quantity, and now I'm doing that with watches. It's interesting. The first, another full circle moment is in 2016, 2017, myself and Tyler, we had this great idea to start a second brand, a whole separate watch. Because right now we take pocket watches and we turn them into wristwatches, and that's the entire business model. It's really difficult to scale that business. And at that time we were trying to figure out how to scale that business. And we were okay, why don't we take some of our investors' feedback and advice and start a separate watch company or a separate brand that uses modern components, a little bit more like your standard modern watch, and then grow a separate product line that's a lot more scalable. And so we had a bunch of ideas around that. And we decided to launch a second Kickstarter campaign for that idea. And when we launched that Kickstarter campaign, my grand idea was to do a whole tour of the US and like do little pop-ups and meet all of our customers in person and talk about it during the entire Kickstarter campaign. And about halfway through, so like literally, 15 to 20 days through, and sitting in, I think we were in Detroit, or maybe we made it to Chicago by that point. We were not raising anywhere near the amount of money we needed to. It was not working, but I had already left my corporate job. So we were all in. And at a certain point, we had some really hard conversations and decided to cancel that Kickstarter campaign and focus all of our energy on the core product, and just make the best damn pocket watch conversion on the planet. And that's what our industry calls it, as a pocket watch conversion. Mm-hmm. And that was, 2017 or so, we came out with what we call version 2 of our product, which we still make today, and decided to focus on quality over quantity, and just go all in on that idea. And since that time, we've sold every single watch we've made. Amazing customer feedback from the watches that we have out there. Basically double the retail price today as like 2016, 2017. And so it's a lot more of a sustainable business financially. And later this year, we're going to try it again. But now we know what we're doing. Now we know, like, in order to properly launch a new product, we need to come up with a whole separate brand, like go big, we need all the infrastructure set up. And so that's why I said it's kind of another full circle moment, is we're about to do the same thing, but now we actually know what to do. We're not, I like to say, we're not kids anymore. we're about 30 now. We're not in our early to mid 20s, just kind of figuring it out and winging everything. We actually know what we're doing now, and I think it'll be a lot more successful.
Well, when you went full time for the second Kickstarter campaign, did you have a family at the time?
No, I had a girlfriend, and that was very, very new. Lindsay, who I'm with now, who we have a couple kids now. We had just started our relationship at that point, and she's also an entrepreneur. And so she was really, excited for me to go full time with Vortic and not have two jobs, and not have the corporate job and the, being an entrepreneur. And so she was super supportive, but we could Tyler and I could both take a lot more risk. Back then, we didn't have as much overhead at home and in the business as we do today.
What was the conversation like when the second Kickstarter didn't go as planned and you kind of had to stop what your original goal was? What was the conversation with yourself, with her? I mean, how did that work out?
Yeah. I don't know if it's a coping method or what, but I block a lot of that stuff out. Like I'm going to be honest, I don't remember a lot of those conversations, probably because they were so difficult. The conversation with Lindsay and my parents and like my support structure was all very positive. It's just like, hey, if that doesn't work out, like you'll figure it out. It's okay. The conversation with Tyler is really what I don't remember. I mean, he and I have had many a difficult conversation in our entrepreneurial career. And I like to say he's my longest relationship. Our partnership is about a decade long now. More than that, actually, since the original idea back in college. And so, I mean, and at that time it was just he and I in a 2003 Prius driving from, I think we were driving from Detroit to Chicago or something like that. Like I said, when we made the decision to kill it. And at that point it was a pivot. We've done several pivots through the length of the company. That was a pretty significant one because we were so excited about that. We called it the Journeyman series, is what we announced on Kickstarter for our second round. And the concept was really exciting. Like we wanted to showcase like all the things that we do. And, the two forms of the word journeyman is like, one, like take you on the journey as a customer of like, how do we make it? And then two, that journeyman craftsmanship, as far as like, you learn something new every day by doing a different project, like, all right, now we're going to figure out how to make the case. And then we're going to figure out how to make the crown, and then we're going to figure out how to make the buckle, and we're going to showcase all that stuff. And it's like this really cool craftsman like how we make it. And so we were stoked about the idea. And so it was just really sad. I would say depressing to like release that idea back out in the world and refocus on the original idea. But in hindsight, like those conversations led to the success that we have now and the opportunity we have now to do it again, but in a very different way that we just know is going to be massively successful because, I mean, we have the experience now to figure it out.
Well, talking about your guys' relationship and your partnership, what do you think has been the reason for the success with the partnership? I mean, I've had a multitude of different partners on here, and it's usually about 50-50, if not a little bit higher for success rate with partners. So what do you think for you two has been the key to success?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing that has made us successful, but has also been the cause of almost failure for us many times, is communication or lack thereof. When he and I are on the same page, and you can make the association to other forms of partnerships, right? Too, it's the same if you ask me about my partnership with Lindsay, it's if you're on the same page and you're both sharing, from the heart, like what you mean and what you feel, then everything's great. If one of us, and I've done this, it's usually been me, because I'm a visionary. Like I have these crazy ideas and I just get them in my head. I can't get them out of my head. And so I just do it. And so if I, like in that scenario, if I do something and I don't tell him that it's coming, the lack of communication is really hurtful, emotionally and financially. Like you got to plan around big moves in a business. You got to be on the same page, and you got to have, we like to use the analogy of like everybody row in the same direction. And especially if he's managing all the rest of the company, which he does now and has for most of the company's life. And me as the visionary CEO is out here doing some crazy shit that I didn't tell anyone I was doing. That creates a divide, and that creates really hard conversations when you have to hash it out and figure out what to do now. Because I made a bunch of promises to people that we have to go figure out. And so that would be the number one thing, is just communication. That's what I've learned. It's just like every time I have an idea now, he's the first person that knows. I'm just like, hey, and I usually preface it with like, random idea time. Don't worry, I haven't told anyone else yet. Please approve this idea or something like that. And then I pitch in my new idea, and then he's either excited about it and we do it and we talk about it. We have a meeting and, get it all figured out. Or he's like, hey, cool, but like, we got all these other things going on. So like, just write that idea down and let's put it on the back burner, let it simmer. We'll circle back. We have fun with, corporate analogies like that too. But it's all about communication and just being on the same page.
Well, talking about fun ideas, I mean, if we're talking in 5 years from now, where do you see your business and yourself going in the next 5 years?
Yeah. So as far as Vortic Watch Company is concerned, because like I said, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I have several other businesses going, and it's just a wild ride. My team has formally, I think, requested that I just don't start another business for at least like 6 months or so. Just give it a minute. But for Vortic Watch Company, we're really excited, and he and I are like officially on the same page in every way now. We've worked through a lot of stuff and have the whole business plan together. Current action plan is we started a YouTube TV show called Custer and Wolf Building a Watch Company. And so we're going to document everything about this new sister brand that we're creating, and put it on YouTube for everyone to see, which I think will be really fun. But as we build it, over the next 5 years, the vision is to turn Vortic Watch Company into basically like a parent company, and then have several brands underneath it. We're going to keep doing what we do right now, turning pocket watches into wristwatches, just kind of rinse and repeat. We've built this really awesome machine of a business that is working really well and is super sustainable and people love. And so we're just going to keep that, no changes. And then we're going to build this first new company, which is it's going to be called Mechanical Products. And so we're we're just going to make what they call everyday carry products. So starting with watches, but then we'll probably get into pens and knives and other like fun things that are made out of metal. And then, at a certain point, we've kind of come to the same conclusion that like, it might be nice to start bringing more things in house, maybe purchase one or two of our suppliers, and have some of that, like have some ownership over our supply chain, especially all this stuff that went down in the pandemic, right? Like if we can make it in America, let's do it. If we can own the entire supply chain, let's do it. We got to protect ourselves from the bullwhip effect of all this stuff. And so that's really the vision of 5 years from now, is to have multiple companies under one parent company, all making watches or very similar related items, and all on that same path of let's make everything or almost everything in the United States, and let's put everything on the internet so we show everyone how it's made and who's making it, because people are really they're wanting to buy stories. They invest in me and Tyler now, not necessarily just the watch. So we just want to go all in on that kind of concept.
Well, talking about stories, I mean, something that was pretty interesting. I think it was maybe from you or your PR person or whoever it was, but talking about the idea of using influencers, I guess, to get the word out there. I mean, that has to be a pretty powerful thing, especially, telling the stories, right? Getting people to understand the brand, know the brand. I mean, can you walk us through a little bit of that kind of journey of finding the right influencers, finding the right people to share your story?
Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of what I call ambassador programs, not necessarily influencer marketing. A lot of people, when they think of influencer marketing, they think of watch companies like MVMT or sunglass companies. I mean, you name it, right? There's just millions of them, and they're selling these very inexpensive things like $20 to $200 retail price. And so they're just shipping, let's use sunglasses as an example. They're shipping 100 pairs of sunglasses a month to 100 different influencers, and either paying them or asking them to post on social media about it and then use their affiliate code or something like that to get a kickback. And that works. Like that 100% works. It's proven. But for us, our products are basically $2,500 to $8,000 a piece, and we only make about 400 a year. So I cannot give them away. It's not a thing. If I do give them away, it has to be a big deal. And so the most recent influencer that we created a partnership of sorts, but I like to say more of an ambassador kind of thing, was Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank. And that came about, and this is, I feel like ambassadors come about very differently than influencers. And that came about because of just a long-standing relationship and friendship I had and have with my friend Anthony, who runs a company called MC Squares. And he was on Shark Tank and got an investment from Mr. Wonderful. And he emailed me. He's like, hey, Kevin just invested in my company. I'd like to buy him a watch as a gift. But can you help me? He only wears watches with red straps, and I don't see many red straps on your website. And if you can do this, like it has to get to the Venetian by tomorrow because they're filming season 13 of Shark Tank. And he wants to I want to make sure he can wear it for one of the episodes. And so like a scenario like that, as a company, we're just like, stop everything. Billionaire Mr. Kevin O'Leary needs a watch. And so we figured it out. We got him a watch. We wrote in a handwritten letter that just said, here's who we are. Like, we take antique American pocket watches and turn them into wristwatches, answered some of the frequently asked questions that you and I have just gone through. And he wore it for the opener of Shark Tank for season 13, which is super awesome. And he wore it for at least one, maybe two, it's hard to tell, episodes in that season. And then he also talked about it on a YouTube show or a YouTube interview he did with his other friend that's a watch collector. They were talking about like a $1.2 million watch. And then Kevin's just like, oh, and I just got this in the mail and I wore it the other day and you got it. Like, he was so much more excited about his Vortic watch than he was about this $1.2 million thing that he was also probably gifted. And it was some of the best press, and some of the best marketing that we've gotten. And it's YouTube, right? We just get new hits every day from stuff like that. So he's the biggest one. But that's when you talk about influencer marketing, I really like to spin it into how do you create relationships and ambassadors without paying for it. Like, we gave him a free watch, but we didn't pay him to say any of the nice things that he said. He said that all organically because he just was like, this is really cool.
So on something like that, how do you level up to the next level on that? So you got him saying some words, wearing it on their show, and then basically talking about it on YouTube. I mean, where does a creative mind like yours take it next? Is it, okay, I'm going to use that, we're going to market it out, we're going to basically share that out, stay in contact with him, and what happens next?
Yeah, it's all about the relationship. So now when I have a request for him or someone near him, I'm not cold calling. I'm like, hey, I'm the guy that sent you that watch that was made from an old pocket watch, and then he'll remember and be like, oh, cool, okay, how can I help? Similar relationships with like Lewis House from the School of Greatness. He has a watch. Dave Hollis has a watch. He wore it on the cover of his most recent book, which is pretty cool. And so, like you said, we use that. We use that to create credibility with the audiences, right? Like, we use the imagery and all that stuff. And then long term and ongoing, we can leverage relationships like that to achieve new and different ones. Another example is we work with an individual that gets our watches into movies and TV shows, utilizing a lot of partnerships and just, all about who right? And so the watch that's on my wrist, it's our military edition. It's on John Krasinski's wrist in Jack Ryan on Netflix for the next 2 seasons, season 3 and season 4. Allegedly, haven't seen it yet, but we got a note from his assistant that was like, John loves this watch and he wants another one for his co-star. And we were like, okay, cool, send another one. You don't say no to John Krasinski. So stuff like that keeps happening, but it's the long game. Like, you got to answer your question, like, you got to play the relationship game, you got to play the long game, you got to show up, you got to have those conversations, and you got to be ready. You got to be ready and willing to accept the miracles. When you get an email from someone like that, you have to figure it out. Yeah.
Has there ever been a time or a moment where you've got one of those requests and in the end it was bogus, or how are you vetting to make sure they're actually legit requests?
Totally. So with experience, you can tell right away. But a lot of people, like, we get emails and Instagram messages all the time from influencers that are just trying to get a free watch. And not all of them are, I don't want to say malicious. Like, it's not like, that's just how a lot of companies do business, is they give away free products all the time. So the best way I can describe like how to know just comes from like experience and asking the right questions like, hey, this is like, thank you for asking. Can you send us more information about yourself, how you'll use it, maybe an example of previous partnerships that you've done with similar companies, things like that. If you run a brand like ours, but that can actually give away significant amount of product, it's worth asking those questions. A lot of influencers have like, I don't want to say like guides, but it's like a PDF that they send you. That's like, here's all their stats, of how many clicks they get and what their usual cost per click is on their ads that they're running, and all that kind of stuff. And that's super helpful. But every partnership like that has either come from a referral, like my friend Anthony from MC Squares, from Shark Tank, or from us reaching out directly. We have somebody that reaches out directly to prop masters to get us into movies. And then like Dave Hollis and Lewis House, I just personally reached out to them on Instagram from my personal account. And the way I phrased it was initially to Lewis House, I said, hey, Lewis, I see you do a bunch of photo shoots. You seem to like watches, a bunch of different watches in your photos. I'm a huge fan of your podcast. Love the content. I'd love to make you a watch, but only if you'd wear it. here's what I do. Let me know if you're interested. And it's one of those things where like you just set the stage right away, where it's just like, I'll give this to you or I'll partner with you, but like only if you actually care in return. Otherwise, like it's not worth it. And hopefully they see your product, they think it's cool, they see how valuable it is based on the retail price and things like that, and they take it seriously accordingly.
Well, Archie, thank you for being here today. I mean, if someone's listening and they're talking about that they want to appreciate kind of a good old fashioned watch made in the US that has some history to it, what's the best way of them finding more information about your watches, upcoming events, and things like that?
Yeah, so pretty straightforward. VorticWatches.com, V as in Victor, ORTIC, watches.com. My email address is really simple. It's just RT, like Robert Thomas, at VorticWatches.com. And you can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram as RT Custer, Custer.
Well, again, thanks, RT, for being here. I'm going to finish off one last question.
Hit me.
If you could look back at that crowdfunding that you first put out there for your initial watch, how has your company changed, your mindset on watches, anything else changed from that initial crowdfunding?
So when we launched on Kickstarter, and I wish I had a picture. I was asking Tyler about this the other day. I don't think either of us has a picture, but when we launched on Kickstarter in 2014, we filled a whiteboard in our house full of all the goals. And like, okay, if we get to $10,000 on Kickstarter in 30 days, we hit our goal. If we get to 50,000, we're going to buy a 3D printer. If we get to, all this stuff. And I forget, but if it was like, when we get to $1 million, we're going to buy a boat for the company or something stupid, right? It was at that time, being entrepreneurs and being young, like right out of college, a lot of it was about money. Like all of our goals were how much money we can make, and all that kind of stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's how the economy works. You got to go make money. But today, that's not what comes first. We all know we have to make money, and thankfully, knock on wood, we're making money. But we enjoy the process a lot more than the end result. And so we talk about our team. How can we, if we want to get to this next level in business, we need 3 more people. We have 3 open jobs right now listed on the website. It's all about the people, right? We have to think about the processes of like when we get to that next level, it means we need 3 more machines. Well, that means we need financing. So we need more investors. We need another banker to help us out. Our decision-making process, to answer your question, is much more complex and has some to do with money, but that's kind of the end result.
Makes sense. Well, I mean, thank you again, RT, for being on the podcast. I mean, for everyone listening, I mean, it's about quality. I mean, I think that's with everything. I mean, you go, okay, well, it takes me so much time to do this. It takes me so much time to do that. Yet, if the quality's there, people will buy it. People will put the time into it, and just having a clear path to wherever you want to get to. Thanks, guys. Please subscribe. Please share. Go in the show notes and go buy a watch. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, guys.